Hey guys, you're in the machine. Adho Mukha Svanasana, downward facing dog. Super common yoga pose. In fact, it's in just about every vinyasa you do because it's part of Sun Salutation A, Surya Namaskar. It's supposed to look like an upside down V, but sometimes because of poor technique and muscle tension, it looks like sort of a crooked roof. We're gonna fix it now. Okay, this is the V we're looking for, and usually tension in the calves and the shoulders prevent it from really being a V. Something else though is technique, the way we angle and position our shoulders and our hips. So let's talk about that really quick before we stretch. A lot of times people get hung up with the front portion of their down dog being kind of bent at the shoulders, and it's often because of the angle of the shoulder blade. So try this really quick from the side. Reach your arms forward and up, and feel how they kind of get stuck before they're very far back. Now, bring your shoulder blades together, drop them down, and reach them out to the side like you're making a snow angel. And look how much farther up, how much farther back behind your head they can go. That's what you want to feel in your down dog. So it's almost like an internal rotation of the arms once they go up to keep those shoulder blades together and down off the ears. So reaching out forward, separating the shoulder blades, it's going to kind of lock you up. But reaching forward but out to the side is going to open your chest a lot more. Secondly, we want to be tall in the lumbar spine. So if you're kind of clumped over, kind of like soft from your hips to your ribs, it's going to make you shorter and less of a straight line. So just practice squeezing your ribs in, taking those transverse abs back toward your spine and getting taller. It's a simple matter of actually engaging the core and tightening it up and lifting instead of just being slumped and relaxed. Those are some positional things. We'll get into where the feet and the hands go on the mat when we get into the pose. But first, let's address some of the tension. So often it's in the front of the chest, this pec and delt area, and usually in the calves. So really easy from a seated pose, warming up these pecs. This is sloppy and easy, but you just want to feel tension in the front. So I'm going to take my right hand as a kickstand, left hand like I'm relaxing at the beach with my hand behind my head, and then I want to lean back, push my chest forward, and peel my elbow, not to the side, but behind me. And I'm pushing with my right hand, my kickstand, to make sure I don't just fall over. So I'm driving my sternum forward and not just peeling back like I only want the pec. I want the whole front of the chest. So this elbow goes behind me this way. And I pull with my neck also to keep the tension. I don't just want to relax my neck or it's all going to let go in the arms. So pushing forward, lead with the chest. Let the stomach be as sloppy as you want. This is not the kind of pose you post on Instagram. We're just trying to stretch the chest a little bit. As long as you need, as much as you need. Make sure you're going straight back, not at an angle. We'll switch it out. Right arm, right hand behind the head. Kickstand with the left so it drives you forward. And then peel that left, or that right elbow behind, not to the side. Behind, like you're trying to arch your back. Back out of it and push in again if you need to. A lot of people are tight in the chest, especially guys. We kind of run around like cavemen, like with our shoulders hunched over. That creates tension on the front. We want that to be open. Second big tension point in this pose is always the calves. There's a little bit of hamstrings, but you're at about a 90-degree angle, about a right angle when you get to that down dog. Most everyone I know can create a right angle at their hips. The catch is getting their heels flat to the mat. That is 100% a matter of calf flexibility. So many easy ways to stretch this without getting into the pose. Here's what I like. You might need a strap if you're really tight, but I just hook the toe from this seated position. I let the back of the leg rest on my other foot or my other shin bone, so I'm not worried too much about stretching the hamstring. And then I try to drive the heel forward. I might have to really lean into it. I might need a strap, but as I drive, I lift the heel and pull back like crazy on the toe to feel the stretch in the calf muscle. And again, you could have a strap here to pull. You might really have to lean forward and then lift. You might be more or less upright, getting a little bit of the hamstring too. But I really want to stretch this calf. If it's available and you have the depth, I also like to reach all the way down and grab the foot and peel the whole thing back toward me. And then sometimes I'll drive it forward to activate the calf and pull it back again. So just a couple of little warm-ups before we get into these actual stretches in the pose. And notice how I'm trying to relieve a little bit of the hamstring tension by resting it on something. I could put a block in here, whatever works. As much of that as you need. This is an easy stretch. You can do it while you're watching TV or having your coffee. Let's switch it out. Again, I keep everything bent for the connection, and then I try to straighten it. And again, it could be a belt or a strap or whatever. And then once I get the tension, I try to lift the heel off the mat. And if it's available, maybe I'll grab the whole foot and pull, pull, pull. I can be totally leaned forward and pulling. I can be upright, looking a little more cool. Remember, this is not really like a yoga pose. It's just a preparatory stretch to put us into the posture. And always remembering to breathe. So, a little bit of a stretch at the front sticking point, which for most people is the chest, and the back sticking point, which for most people is the calves. Now, we're getting into the actual position for puppy pose, which, as you can guess, is just a short and small version of down dog. Surprised you didn't know that. Tension across the front of the chest can be a huge hang-up in getting that V shape. So what we can do is isolate the stretch without doing the whole pose. Really simple is this puppy pose. Just like it sounds, it's down dog with the knees low, like a small dog. So all I'm going to do is make sure my scapula are together like we just discussed. Reach my arms out, fingertips first. This is important for the height. We're going to use the block forward in a second. And I'm going to drive my hips back and try to bring my chest low for that stretch. I can put my palms flat, but doesn't create the same stretch. That's why I like fingertips up. Don't worry about what's going on with your legs and the angle of your butt or anything else. This is specifically a stretch for the chest right now. So imagine shoulder blades together, shoulders down off the ears, and I'm dropping my sternum down toward the mat. Should be a big stretch in your pecs and the very front of your chest. If you need a little more, that's what the blocks are for. You can put them on whatever height works, but it just gives you some distance from the mat to sink your chest to. So I can hold these out here, pull my hips back, and drop my sternum down, stretching out the front of that chest. Again, if my scapula are separated, it's going to literally I'm going to get in the way of the stretch with my own joint. If I bring the scapula together, internally rotating my arms, I can get a lot more depth. Puppy pose. You can also isolate this, maybe one at a time to drop even lower, but make sure you're still going back straight like we did in the opening stretch. Don't get some funky angle. Continue to drive yourself back and back. Now, addressing the calves, we're also going to isolate the stretch. So all we're going to do is get into a sloppy, junky down dog. Forget about the upper body. We're going to put the weight in one calf and lightly bounce it. So from here, I'm actually going to push as hard as I can back into one heel, set the other foot wrapped around the top, and then mess with my depth. That is, from here, my heel probably hits. But as I walk my hands forward and my foot back, my heel gets a little higher off the ground, and I can drive all my weight back toward it and bounce a little bit. This is a really strong muscle, a really tight muscle, the calf. So chances of tearing it on a bounce are pretty slim, but that being said, there's no reason to get really bonkers and jump into it. Just move around and feel it a little bit, but notice how I'm angling my hip to make this more accessible heel to the ground. When the hips are square, I don't have that advantage of dropping additional weight into that foot. Of course, we'll try it on the other side. Forget about the upper body. This can be as junky as it needs to be. Right now, we're just stretching the calf. Moving around a little bit. Remembering to breathe as much as you need. You can also adjust the depth. That is the distance between your hands and your feet. So if I'm really tight in the calves, maybe from here, really, really short down dog, they do touch the mat. But as I move out, they get higher and higher from the mat. So there's nothing wrong when you're practicing your down dog with adjusting the distance from your hands and your feet just to get a more useful stretch out of it instead of looking perfect like you came directly up from a plank or something. So a lot of times at the beginning of my practice, I'm kind of shallow, and as I open up more, I get wider and wider and wider with a little bit more depth. Those are the two big sticking points for most people's flexibility, the opening of the chest and the range of motion in the calves. Sometimes people end up kind of looking like this, bent at the shoulders and bent at the knees. I suggest never bending the knees. If you want to bend the knees, practice bear pose, that's great. But if you want to work on that flexibility of those calves, get your buns as high as they go, up on your tippy toes, push back as far as you can, and then slowly lower the heels. Maybe they go all the way down, maybe they don't. But the more you keep the tension on, the more you're actually going to be performing a stretch. But you can isolate this between the lower and the upper body. So sometimes with newer people, I'll have them do whatever it takes to plant the heels, lift the buns, and leave them there, and then walk their hands out in whatever mangled, goofed up way they have to keep stretching the calves. Same with the upper body. If they need to turn their toes out or do something really weird or get really wide with their feet to push their chest down, I encourage that also. Usually, you're going through a dozen or more of these down dogs in your sun style, so you can kind of alternate focusing on the lower body and the upper body. Positioning of the hands and feet is also pretty important. Just remember, shoulder width and hip width for the hands and the feet, respectively. Some people get confused because they're really muscular and they think that their grip is wide when it's shoulder width. It's your shoulder joint, not your shoulder muscle. Same thing if you got a big butt. Don't widen your feet out to be lined up with your buns. Put them in line with the socket of the hip. Driving should be back and up. So it's really hard to do because there's weight going into your hands and your feet, but imagine that you're trying to push your hips back behind you. And what that'll do is straighten these arms. So from this spot, if there's a lot of weight in my hands, I want to drive my hips up and back, and I equalize the pressure on the mat in my palms. Some people will say really drive the fingers. That's going to affect this flexor tendon in your forearm and it's going to get really sore. Some people will say put a little more pressure in your palms. That's going to make your wrist sore. I say try to even it out. So you're pushing with your fingertips, the pad of these knuckles, and the base of your palm and your thumb, just like you would if you were standing up on your feet. You don't want to have all the weight in your heels or all the weight in your toes. You sort of spread it out so any damage is limited to any one spot. So one more time, Adho Mukha Svanasana, downward facing dog. Let's say I'm in a chaturanga and I want to rise up to down dog. I lift, buns go up. I settle my feet, hip width. I evenly drive my palms shoulder width. I push my hips up and back I drive my chest down about 3/4 of the way. If I push it too far back, it misaligns me. And if I lean it forward, my arms aren't straight. I also try to look at about my knees or my thighs. Some people say look way up at your chest, but that tends to round my spine, and then I'm not in as much of a straight line. I end up kind of being kind of like a half rounded V. So I'm pushing up, sternum's pointed this way, but hips are up and back, and I'm looking at about my knees or my shins, trying to be eventually an upside down V, or pretty close to it. Downward facing dog. You can do it. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you're in the machine.
But the whole point of the machine is to relieve you of that suffering.